Welcome to the Sleep Hours, the only place where cartoons fall asleep before you do. So grab your blanket, tuck in your favorite plushie, and let's get weird. Today's story is the night the Titan slept. The sun had begun its slow descent into the shimmering waters of Jump City Bay, casting warm golden hues across the glass panels of Titan's tower. The sea breeze, gentle and rhythmic, whispered secrets as it drifted through the trees along the coastline, rustling the leaves like soft applause. The world seemed to exhale the chaos of the day, fading into a soothing calm, like a lullaby playing just beneath the sounds of the surf. Inside the tower, the atmosphere mirrored the serenity outside. The usual clamor, the buzzing alarms, the high-octane energy that often pulsed through its high-tech corridors had dimmed to a tranquil quiet. For once, there were no villains on rooftops, no distress calls blinking red, no sudden booms in the distance. Only the low hum of technology at rest, the faint whir of the security system scanning peacefully for, well, nothing in particular. From the common room's massive window, the view was breathtaking, the kind of view that demanded silence, not out of reverence, but because words simply didn't fit. The entire bay stretched wide and slow beneath the evening sky, where clouds were painted in streaks of peach and lavender. Gulls floated gently above the water, their calls softened by the distance. The living room lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow, casting long, lazy shadows across the furniture. The couch, usually a battlefield for popcorn wars and action movie marathons, now looked inviting in the most domestic way. Worn cushions, a folded blanket over one armrest, and a half-read magazine on the coffee table. Nearby, the kitchen carried the lingering aroma of dinner, something cozy, something warm. The kind of meal that doesn't impress with flair, but comforts with familiarity. Even the tower itself seemed to be breathing slower, as if the metal and circuits and screens that made up its very heart had chosen, just for tonight, to relax. The central console sat quietly, its interface in sleep mode, casting a faint blue glow onto the walls like moonlight on steel. From the hallways came distant sounds, the clink of a mug being set down, the shuffle of slippers on polished floors, the distant hum of someone humming to themselves in a room with the door half closed. This was a rare kind of evening, a pocket of time untouched by urgency, a quiet space between chaos and dreams, and in that stillness, there was something magical. From the rooftop garden, a hidden gem many didn't know existed atop the giant tiais. The breeze carried the scent of herbs and fresh flowers. It was a small space, mostly overlooked during the day, but tonight it thrived. Lavender danced in the breeze. Tiny solar lights blinked on along the garden edges like stars pulling themselves up from the soil. The sky above it deepened into indigo, with the first hints of starlight peeking through. And though the Titans themselves weren't visible at first glance, their presence was felt in every corner. Not as superheroes, but as young people simply enjoying the rare stillness of a moment. Their rooms lit from inside with the soft glow of desk lamps, the occasional shadow moving behind a curtain, the sound of pages turning in a book, a gentle thud of a drawer closing, someone's quiet laughter echoing faintly from the game room before fading into hush again. There was no need to speak tonight. No one needed to ask what came next. The tower, alive with memory and history, simply embraced the peace, as if it too longed for these little interludes of stillness. It was a pause in the music, a breath in the dance, a moment where the world was finally, perfectly, quiet. Out on the balcony overlooking the bay, the sky turned a deeper blue, stars stitching themselves into the fabric of night. The moon rose silver and slow, and the waves below caught its reflection in scattered fragments, like tiny mirrors dancing on the tide. Somewhere far off, a ship's horn sounded low and long, but even that felt like part of the lullaby. Time stretched here, not in a sluggish, heavy way, but like honey being poured slowly into tea, every second savored, every sound noticed. It was the kind of evening that asked for wool socks and loose sweatshirts, for fingers wrapped around warm mugs, for soft sighs and even softer smiles. And as the tower stood quiet against the horizon, tall and familiar, its silhouette gently etched against the last light of day, it seemed almost protective. A silent guardian watching over not just the city, but its own, its family. Yes, tonight was something special. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. No alarms, no danger, no racing into battle. Just a moment where the world slowed down and let them be. Far below the tower, the city sparkled like a blanket of lights gently draped across the land. Cars moved like fireflies through the streets, their headlights weaving slow, deliberate patterns. It was the kind of night where even the city itself, usually so electric, so brimming with urgency, seemed to take a breath. Buildings stood still, their windows glowing softly with evening routines. Somewhere, music played through an open window. A piano, perhaps. A gentle flowing tune that didn't demand attention. It simply was, like background music, to the perfect moment. Inside the tower, the quiet hum of activity remained not the kind sparked by emergency, but rather by calm rituals. In the main kitchen, a kettle whistled briefly before being pulled from the burner. Steam rose in curls from the spout, swirling upward toward the ceiling like sleepy dragons. The scent of herbal tea mingled with the faint aroma of old wood and metal, a strange but oddly comforting combination. Somewhere, a chair scraped gently against the floor as someone settled in. A few rooms down, the game lounge sat in a half-lit state, the main screen paused mid-match, two controllers resting where they were left. The room hadn't been abandoned out of boredom. Rather, it felt as though someone had simply chosen to press pause and drift into thought. One corner of the room was bathed in soft neon from a retro arcade machine that quietly blinked to itself like a lighthouse in a fog of nostalgia. Through one of the glass hallways, the kind that overlooked the ocean, directly a figure moved slowly, thoughtfully. No rush in their step, just an easy rhythm, barefoot, on cold metal floors. They stopped by the window for a long moment, placing a hand gently against the glass. On the other side, the waves rolled and curled like silk threads, weaving patterns no one could trace. And as the figure turned and continued walking, the reflection lingered in the glass, a ghost of stillness captured in motion. Back in the common room, the couch had become a quiet anchor. A cozy pile of blankets now settled on one side, a half-finished sketch on the table next to it. A mug once steaming, now lukewarm, sat quietly, untouched for a while. The tower's lights had automatically dimmed themselves further, matching the sky's darkening tones. It was the kind of automation that didn't feel mechanical, but intuitive, as if the building itself understood the mood of the evening and responded in kind. The bookshelf, often ignored in favor of more high-energy pursuits, had a few volumes missing tonight. The kind of thick, well-worn books that smelled faintly of paper and time. The ones you didn't skim but disappeared into. Soft page flips echoed occasionally from down the hall. A light turned off, a door creaked slightly and then shut with a gentle click. Another layer of calm settling in like snowfall. Out on the balcony, the stars had taken full command of the sky now. Their quiet shimmer pulsed like slow heartbeats above the sea. The moon had climbed higher, silver and sure, casting a ribbon of light across the water. The breeze had cooled, but not enough to chase anyone inside. Instead, it simply invited thicker hoodies and longer silences, the kind shared between friends who didn't need to fill every moment with words. From a distance, the tower looked serene, a monolithic shape silhouetted against the deep velvet of the night, its windows glowing like fireflies trapped in glass. A lighthouse not just for the city, but for the people inside it. It didn't boast. It didn't shine with fanfare. It simply stood, solid, constant, familiar, like a sigh in the dark, like home. Within its walls, time continued to slow, not out of reluctance, but out of care. The way one lingers in a favorite chapter of a book, not quite ready to turn the page. There was a sacredness in the routine tonight, in the sound of a shower running softly behind a closed door, in the gentle thud of someone folding laundry, in the almost inaudible bass line of a playlist playing behind someone's door low enough that only the rhythm made it out. Even the tower's AI systems, typically alert and bustling with data, seemed to soften their glow. Security lights pulsed calmly. Holographic displays dimmed. Surveillance feeds continued their work, but without urgency, like watchful eyes behind half-closed lids. Somewhere deep within the walls, the tower's heartbeat, that constant, barely there thrum of energy and electricity, pulsed with a rhythm that matched the evening perfectly. Not sharp or fast, but steady and low, like a lullaby written in lights and wires. Out in the distance, a lighthouse beacon swept slowly across the bay, blinking its eternal warning into the night. But tonight there were no storms to warn against. Just stillness, just stars, just peace. And somewhere, in one of the tower's many corners, a framed photo sat quietly on a shelf, a captured memory from some old mission or celebration. A reminder that life within the tower was built not just on battles and teamwork, but on bonds, on friendship, on countless evenings just like this one, quiet, soft, unremarkable in the grand scheme, but unforgettable in the heart. Because this gentle, golden quiet was just as important as any victory, just as necessary as any training, just as powerful as any battle cry. And tonight, it belonged entirely to them. In a world that so often spun too fast, this evening had become a rare sanctuary, a moment where time felt reluctant to move forward. Somewhere within the tower, the faint ticking of a wall clock marked each passing second, with a softness that made them feel heavier, more meaningful. It was the kind of night that could blur the edges of memory, where the line between now and then faded into a single feeling, contentment. A dim hallway light blinked to life, triggered by a slow footstep. Not rushed, not purposeful, just wandering. Maybe someone heading to the kitchen for a late-night snack. Or maybe just unable to sleep, drawn by the hush of the tower and the peace it promised. There was comfort in knowing they didn't have to be on tonight. No suits, no training, just the tower and themselves. Somewhere on one of the upper levels, a window had been left open just a crack, letting in the breeze, cool, salt-tinged, and full of the quiet night story. It lifted a curtain slightly, fluttering it like a flag of truce. The room it belonged to was scattered with little pieces of life. Books opened mid-thought, trinkets from missions past, posters taped slightly crooked to the walls. A half-finished model sat under a desk lamp, its pieces laid out in quiet expectation. Further down, the tower gym, usually alive with movement, energy, and the rhythmic clash of practice, sat completely still. A lone punching bag swayed just barely, likely nudged by the ventilation's gentle breath. A pair of gloves hung over a bench, forgotten for now. The mirrored walls reflected the empty space, doubling the stillness, like a moment frozen in crystal. And yet, for all this quiet, nothing about the tower felt empty. It wasn't silence born from absence, but from rest, a deep, earned kind of rest that wraps around the soul like a blanket. Every corner of the tower buzzed with subtle signs of life, a warm light here, a creak of floorboards there, the sound of someone brushing their teeth, the flick of a light switch, the soft ping of a message received on a tablet but not yet opened. In the library alcove, a single lamp stood watch over the reading chair, oversized, a little worn but clearly loved. A book lay open on its armrest, a knitted throw draped across the seat. Dust motes drifted lazily in the beam of light like tiny constellations. Even the air here felt heavier, not with burden but with calm, like the tower itself remembered every hour spent here, escaping into pages, every moment of quiet reflection, every breath taken in the safety. Above all of this, the roof remained the crown of peace, the tower's quiet throne overlooking a dreaming city. The garden up there, tucked away where few would think to look, had become a kind of hidden sanctuary. Tiny lanterns bobbed in the breeze on string lights, casting golden halos over the flower beds and planters. A wind chime made of old keys and beads tinkled now and then, playing music only the wind could write. Someone had placed a beanbag chair near the edge, facing the bay, soft, oversized, perfect for melting into. A journal sat open beside it, half-filled pages fluttering slightly, anchored by a smooth pebble. A thermos sat next to it, still warm to the touch. All of it told a story without words. Someone had come up here, needed a moment, found it, and maybe would return again before the night ended. And then there was the music, distant but there, a soft, lo-fi beat playing behind closed doors. Faint enough that it didn't fill the air, but suggested it was there if you leaned in. Perhaps someone curled up under their blanket with headphones on, eyes closed, letting the sound carry them somewhere safe, somewhere weightless, somewhere far from worry. Elsewhere, a candle flickered gently on a desk, its flame small, steady, scented with something subtle and calming. Vanilla, maybe lavender. A pair of slippers waited just under the chair, the kind of details that went unnoticed during busier days. But tonight, they spoke volumes. Peace, after all, didn't need to be loud. It didn't have to announce itself with fanfare or fireworks. Sometimes it was in the way a door closed quietly behind someone, in the way a favorite hoodie still held warmth from earlier, in the steady pulse of the tower's quiet machines, holding space for rest. The moon was high now, its reflection stretching long across the bay. Below, waves whispered to the shore like old friends sharing secrets. The wind had shifted just slightly, cooler now, brushing against the tower's exterior like a lullaby. You could almost hear if you really listened. Even the sky had grown quieter. The stars no longer twinkled with excitement, but with ease, comfortable in their places, unbothered by the night's stillness. A few clouds drifted lazily by, soft and slow, painting gentle shapes above the rooftop garden. And still, the tower stood, steady as ever, watching, listening, cradling its inhabitants in steel arms and golden light. Its foundations humming not with battle readiness, but with something deeper, something older, the quiet hum of home. No explosions, no enemies, no world to save. Just this moment. A moment held like a breath held like a prayer. Somewhere on the main floor, a soft click echoed through the quiet. The tower's central doors locking for the night. Not with force, not with urgency, just a gentle seal, like drawing a curtain closed on a stage after the final act. Outside, the world continued to turn, cities still breathed, and distant problems stirred in shadows. But none of that mattered right now. Not here. Not tonight. In the training hall, dark and silent, old footprints still dusted the floor from earlier drills. Faint scuffs along the wall, an abandoned towel thrown over a bench. But the space had grown still, as though it too had taken the night off. No echoes bounced off the walls. No punching pads clashed in rhythm. Instead, the silence was thick and complete, a kind of respectful hush, as if the very air was tucking itself in. Farther in, on a softly lit hallway wall, hung a timeline of framed photographs, years of shared victories, strange adventures, awkward group poses, and spontaneous moments of joy. Some photos were neat, perfectly centered. Others were tilted slightly askew, as though someone had nudged them in passing and never fixed them. They weren't just memories, they were anchors. And in the soft light of night, the faces in those frames seemed to glow with quiet, reminding the tower of all it had witnessed, of the stories it carried in its walls. There was something beautiful in the stillness, something honest. Moments like these, stripped of chaos and noise, had a way of revealing truth, that beneath the titles, beneath the battles, beneath the constant pressure to protect and perform, they were just young people trying to live, laugh, grow, heal. In one of the side rooms, a lava lamp bubbled lazily. A soft pink glow filled the space like cotton candy light. The bubbles rose and fell with no rush, hypnotic and slow. A pair of headphones rested on a nightstand. A blanket was half draped over a bed, still warm. A notebook lay open, scribbled thoughts scattered across the page, incomplete, messy, real. It wasn't on a hero's quarters, it was just someone's room, someone's haven. Across the tower, similar pockets of life pulsed gently. A hallway light flicked off one by one as motion sensors reset. A fridge door opened briefly, spilling light into the dark kitchen before closing again. A soft hum of someone brushing their teeth. The quick shuffle of slippers down a corridor. Someone sighing in relief as they sank into bed. And then, from somewhere near the observatory, the sound of wind chimes again, delicate, echoing softly across the rooftop. The breeze had picked up just slightly, pushing the scent of the ocean deeper into the tower's bones. It wasn't a storm, just a reminder that the world outside was still turning, still alive, still vast. The tower's systems remained half awake. Security cameras rotated slowly, their lenses blinking in idle watch. Power levels steady, temperature regulated. It was a home running on instinct, not cold, but caring. Every wire, every wall, every floor had grown used to the rhythms of the lives it held. The tower wasn't just their base. It had become something more. A witness, a shelter, a quiet guardian. Down in the sublevels, the garage sat untouched. Rows of vehicles lined in precision, untouched tonight. Their engines quiet. Their dashboards dark. Ready if needed, but grateful not to be. The silence here was heavier, denser, as though the metal and machinery themselves were resting. And then, a moment. In the heart of the tower, under the grand window that stretched 2 stories tall, the last flicker of city lights reflected on the floor. The stars above blinked gently, their reflections dancing across the polished surface like shy fireflies. The room was vast, but it didn't feel empty. It felt sacred, like a cathedral made of steel and hope, a space that had seen so much joy, pain, reunions, arguments, laughter, and held all of it like treasured relics. In that moment, the tower didn't feel like a place. It felt like a person. Quiet, thoughtful, watching, listening. The elevator let out a soft ding, a single sound, polite and non-invasive. Someone moved slowly inside, exiting barefoot, with a small blanket tucked around their shoulders. They didn't say a word. Didn't need to. They just stood for a moment, staring out over the bay, arms folded, breath fogging the window for a second before fading. And then, with a tiny smile, they turned and disappeared back down the hall. The ding came again, and the elevator descended into stillness once more. The tower's lights dimmed just a little further. One by one, floor by floor, they softened. Not all at once, just gradually, like eyes growing heavier before sleep. Screens faded to blacks. Consoles powered into standby. Rooms settled. From the highest rooftop garden, the view had become a velvet masterpiece. The ocean, ink black now, kissed only by moonlight. The city lights behind twinkling like a promise. And the stars, those same ones they'd always watched, seemed closer than ever. Familiar. Protective. And so the tower rested. Not just the walls, not just the tech, but the energy. The life of the place. It exhaled slowly, gently, and the peace lingered like a final note in a lullaby. This was not a night they would remember for action. There were no enemies vanquished, no grand revelations, no major decisions made, but it would live in their hearts just the same, as a night that asked for nothing and gave everything. Stillness, warmth, the quiet hum of belonging. Titan's tower didn't sleep, but tonight it dreamed. While the rest of Titan's tower nestled comfortably into its tranquil rhythm, tucked away in one of the quieter corners just beyond the main hall, past a slightly creaky door and into a sunken sitting room softened with draped curtains and flickering light, there bloomed a little world of its own. The space was warm, not just from the steam rising from a porcelain teapot, or the soft golden hue of the hanging lanterns above, but from the gentle energy that filled the room like a hug that never ended. It wasn't large, not by the tower's usual standards, but it didn't need to be. It wasn't a space for battle plans or briefings. It was a space for quiet things, for stories whispered instead of told, for laughter that didn't echo but sank in deep and stayed. A thick rug sprawled across the floor, rich with patterns that seemed to dance in the low lighting. Plush cushions were scattered everywhere, as though the room couldn't decide between being a lounge or a daydream. And at the very center, the heart of the space, sat a low, round table, covered in a soft lilac cloth with delicate embroidery along the edges. Atop it, a ceramic teapot steamed gently, surrounded by tiny mismatched teacups, and a plate of curious-looking pastries that seemed to glow faintly into the dim light. Each treat looked unfamiliar, but inviting, like something from a planet no one could name, yet everyone would want to visit. This was Starfire's sanctuary. It wasn't built with blueprints or logic. It was made from feelings, from nostalgia, from traditions carried across galaxies and infused into earthbound comfort. A place where cushions were plump enough to sink into memories, where the scent of the tea, a delicate mix of floral spice and something not entirely from this world, hung in the air like perfume from a dream. Tonight she had laid it all out with quiet intention. The cups were placed with care, their tiny handles turned just right. A soft cloth had been folded and set beside each place, edged with hand-sewn thread, no two alike. The tea itself, brewed with slow patience, filled the air with a warmth that reached past the skin and into the soul. It wasn't just about the flavor. It was about presence. It was about slowing down, about listening with your eyes as much as your ears, about holding a cup, feeling its warmth seep into your palm, and allowing silence to be enough. Starfire's tea time wasn't a performance. It was a ritual, a small ceremony of peace that asked for nothing in return. And somehow, as the evening deepened outside and the tower grew even quieter, this little corner of it glowed just a bit brighter. A small plant in the corner, a gift from somewhere else, possibly Earth, possibly not, had unfurled one of its petals in the warmth. A gentle light pulsed from its center like a heartbeat. The tablecloth rippled softly as someone moved past, the fabric catching the candlelight in threads of gold. And beneath it all, a quiet melody hummed from a tiny speaker tucked behind a pillow, a lullaby with no words, just sound and feeling. It could have been from Tamarin, or maybe it wasn't from anywhere at all. It simply fit. The walls were lined with shelves, not packed, but thoughtfully filled. Little ceramic figures, hand-painted and slightly chipped. Books written in languages that bent in gentle curls instead of lines, and a photo one where everyone was laughing at something clearly unexpected, slightly out of frame. It was slightly faded at the edges, which only made it feel more loved. The tea was ready. Poured slowly, carefully, the way one might handle stardust or secrets. The steam danced upward, curling in the dim light like whispers trying to speak. Starfire didn't rush it. She never did. Time moved differently here. Minutes stretched wide, unhurried. There was no clock in the room intentionally, as though time itself had been asked politely to wait outside. Each sip from the cup brought a kind of calm that was hard to explain. It wasn't just that it was warm, or that it tasted good. It was the care behind it. The tradition of sharing. The stillness of being with others, or even just with oneself, in a way that didn't require conversation, didn't require doing, just being. The cushions shifted as someone sat down quietly. A hand reached for a cup. No words were exchanged, only a soft smile, the kind born from long friendships and nights like these. There was a reverence in the way things moved here. Not stiff or formal, just gentle, intentionally slow, as though hurrying would somehow disrupt the delicate magic of it all. Even the air in the room felt different, thicker, somehow softer. It wasn't heavy. It was comforting, like being wrapped in a memory, or like floating inside a dream where nothing could reach you unless you invited it in. As the moonlight outside stretched its fingers across the windows, casting long beams of silver over the tea set, the room became a painting, a quiet portrait of peace, of warmth, of kindness without words. The tower, always humming with purpose and possibility, allowed this room, this hour, to exist untouched. It knew this was something sacred, something only Starfire could create. Outside, the sea continued, its endless rhythm waves brushing softly against the shore, matching the pace of the calm that had settled within the tower. Yet inside this quiet sanctuary, Starfire's tea room remained a small, glowing universe, untouched by time or tide. A low candle flickered from its ceramic base, casting slow-moving shadows across the cushions and the draped walls. Its scent soft, sweet, and just a little bit citrus filled the corners of the room, mixing with the perfume of the tea. The blend of aromas was impossible to describe fully. There was something floral, something warm, and something almost nostalgic, like the smell of sunlight caught in linen or laughter preserved in glass. No one ever asked what the tea was made from, not because they weren't curious, but because somehow the mystery was part of the magic. The tea always tasted like what you needed, like calm on a hard day, like brightness on a cloudy one, like understanding when no words could help. The flavor changed slightly each time, but it always felt familiar, always right. The room itself seemed to breathe in time with the tea's steam, a slow inhale, a long, comforting exhale, the soft rustle of fabric as someone adjusted their seat, the clink of porcelain against wood. It all became part of the symphony of stillness. Nothing jarring, nothing loud, just the sounds of rest, of quiet company. A soft purring came from somewhere near the pillows, a visitor, not quite a cat, not quite anything recognizable. Furry, small, and glowing faintly green, the creature had curled itself into a warm lump beside one of the tea trays, content to simply exist in the presence of peace. Starfire had found it some time ago, or perhaps it had found her. Either way, it now appeared during moments like these, as though summoned by serenity itself. Occasionally, someone would glance out the nearby window, not to check the time, not to measure the passing night, but simply to marvel. The stars were clear tonight, so many so bright, like tiny whispers etched across the sky, each carrying stories long forgotten or never told. The moon's glow filtered through the window in quiet waves, falling onto the teacups like blessings. On one of the shelves nearby, a set of small, handcrafted jars sat in a perfect line, each filled with something different: dried herbs, glowing beads, sweet dusts, strange little leaves that shimmered when touched by light. Starfire didn't label them. She remembered them all by heart. Every jar held a purpose, a feeling, a memory. Some were used in teas, others were just there to remind her of home, of skies with 3 suns, of winds that whispered in colors, of voices she hadn't heard in years but still carried in her chest. She hadn't spoken much tonight. She didn't need to. Her energy filled the room, not loudly, but in a way that warmed every corner. Her presence alone brought calm. The way she moved, the way she poured tea, the way she gently smiled as someone reached for a cup, it all said more than words ever could. Nearby, a small notebook sat open on the floor, pages marked with ink that shimmered faintly in the low light. Curving letters in a language most couldn't read, written in a flowing script that seemed to dance rather than sit still. Notes, thoughts, maybe poetry, or maybe just dreams she'd decided to catch on paper before they floated too far away. No one read them. They were hers. And somehow, even in their mystery, they added to the room's comfort like the hum of a lullaby without lyrics. The tea was halfway gone now. The pot's steam had slowed, its warmth still lingering, but fading just a little enough to signal the gentle winding down of the moment. And yet no one moved to leave. The room didn't demand anything, not even attention. It simply invited you to stay, to sit just a little longer, to feel. Time, if it still mattered at all, moved differently here. It wasn't tracked in minutes or seconds, but in sips, in sighs, in shared glances. There was a rhythm to it, but it was organic, like tides, like breathing, like the way comfort settles into your bones when you finally feel safe enough to let your shoulders drop. It was Starfire's gift, not just the tea, not just the setting, but the ability to create a pause in the world, a space between heartbeats, a moment that lived outside the noise. Even as the rest of the tower slept, or read, or wandered its quiet halls, this little room remained lit, glowing like a lantern hung in the darkness. Not to guide, not to warn, but simply to be, to say, here is warmth, here is calm, here is quiet, and you are welcome. And so the tea was poured again, not because anyone asked, but because she knew it was time, a new cup, a new moment, another breath in this evening of light and stillness. As the next cup was poured, the steam rose again, thin and silver, curling through the soft amber glow of the room. It moved like memory, delicate and impossible to hold. There was a stillness in the air now that had deepened, matured not the silence of absence, but a presence fully embraced. It was the kind of quiet that only arrived after hours of warmth. The kind that settled deep into your chest and whispered, "You are safe." Starfire's hands, graceful and practiced, moved with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times, not in repetition, but in reverence. Each gesture mattered. The way she lifted the teapot, the slow, careful tilt of her wrist, the pause to let the tea settle, not spill. Every motion was a silent expression of love, of peace, of being wholly in the moment. No one ever rushed tea time. That was an unspoken rule. It wasn't just about drinking, it was about presence. There were no distractions here. No buzzing phones, no glowing screens, only the warm weight of ceramic in your hand, the gentle heat through your fingertips, and the quiet pulse of comfort stretching between everyone in the room. A soft breeze stirred through the open window, now light and sea-scented, pulling gently at the edges of the drapes. The curtains fluttered like soft wings, brushing the floor and rising again, whispering against the bookshelves as they passed. It was a reminder. The world outside still turned. But within these walls, time folded itself into a slower rhythm. The tiny, glowing creature from earlier had now dozed off completely, its belly rising and falling in tiny, even pulses. Occasionally, its tail flicked slightly in its sleep, causing the faintest jingling of the tiny charm tied around it, a gift, perhaps, a memory. Or maybe just something Starfire thought it would like. No one asked. Some things were just allowed to be beautiful without explanation. A second candle was lit quietly in the corner. It cast a new warmth into the space, not to chase away shadows, but to give them depth. Shadows were allowed here. They danced on the walls, long and soft, curling around pillows and painting the shelves in gold-edged silhouettes. The room didn't reject darkness. It welcomed it, softened it, held it close. Someone shifted on their cushion, pulling a knitted throw over their shoulders. The texture was thick, made from uneven yarn, clearly handmade maybe by Starfire herself. The stitches weren't perfect, but they held, and somehow that made them more meaningful. It was the kind of blanket that had heard stories, that had soaked in quiet tears, warm laughter, and unspoken comfort for years. On the far wall, a small painting hung just slightly off-center, a watercolor, all swirling violets and deep orange, like a sky from another world. It wasn't signed. There was no name, no date. But when the light hit it just right, the painting shimmered faintly. Starfire had placed it there years ago, and it had remained untouched ever since. It didn't need adjusting. Like everything in this room, it was exactly as it was meant to be. The soft music continued to hum from the little speaker, still subtle, still wordless like it too, understood the sacredness of the space. It didn't try to dominate, it just accompanied. A quiet friend, staying just close enough to be felt. Now and then someone would let out a quiet breath, not dramatic, not sighing, just a release, a letting go. The kind of exhale that didn't carry weight but let it slip away. There were no heavy conversations here tonight. No big declarations, just presence, shared in its simplest, most meaningful form. Starfire sat quietly, legs folded beneath her, a second cup resting in her palms. Her expression, soft, thoughtful, reflected a stillness that came not from exhaustion, but from intention. She wasn't trying to entertain. She wasn't trying to fix. She was simply being, radiant in her calm, her kindness so woven into the moment that it was impossible to separate the atmosphere from her energy. The room continued to hum with this warm silence, not stagnant, but alive in its quiet. The kind of silence where minds wandered gently, not lost, just drifting. The kind where thoughts softened at the edges, where the air didn't need to be filled because the space already felt full. A candle burned a little lower. The teapot had cooled slightly now and the steam more delicate. A gentle prompt the evening was passing, slowly, tenderly, but passing all the same. And still, no one moved to break the spell. The tea room held them close like hands cupped around a firefly. Gentle, careful, loving. This was Starfire's greatest strength, though she never claimed it as such. Her ability to turn stillness into connection, to craft moments out of nothing, to make a room and the people in it feel held. The minutes trickled on like honey, slow, golden, and warm. Outside the tower, the world continued to sleep beneath the moon, and yet in this little pocket of light and softness, time had fully surrendered. There was no urgency, no destination. Just now. The teapot had gone quiet. No more steam, no more warmth radiating through the porcelain. But it didn't matter. The tea had already done its work. Every sip had carried a story, every cup a quiet message. You're safe. You're seen. You're allowed to rest. The final droplets clung to the rim of the spout, catching the candlelight like stars. No one moved to refill it. The act of pausing, of simply sitting among others in shared stillness, had replaced any need for more. It wasn't about the tea anymore. It never really had been. The ritual, the warmth, the presence, that was the heart of it. Soft footsteps approached from the hallway. No announcement, no rush. Just the padded sound of someone arriving late, but welcome. Without hesitation, the newcomer sank into a pillow beside the others. No words exchanged. Just a shared glance, a small smile. Starfire responded with a gentle nod and passed them the last of the warm tea, cooled now, yes, but no less meaningful. The moment included them fully, as though they'd been there all along. In the quiet that followed, the candles flickered in gentle rhythm. Their flames danced low, casting long, swaying shadows against the fabric walls. The patterns on the tablecloth shifted with the light, almost appearing to move, like painted silk stirred by breath alone. The breeze had died down, and the night outside pressed softly against the windows like velvet. The tiny, glowing creature yawned once a quiet chirp, then back into its curled, fuzzy sleep. Even the room itself seemed to sigh, not in tiredness, but in completion, like the universe had been given a moment to rest and had finally taken it. A soft chime rang out in the distance. The tower's internal system marking a late hour, unobtrusive, gentle, like a lullaby chime echoing in a dream. It didn't mean bedtime. It simply meant that time had, in fact, continued. That the world was still turning, even if they'd been suspended in something quieter for a while. Still no one stood. No one gathered dishes or folded throws or began to shuffle away. Because this wasn't the kind of moment you ended. This was the kind of moment you let fade naturally, like embers in a fire. Soft, gradual, with grace. Starfire looked out the window again. And for a second, just a second, her eyes shimmered, not with reflection, but with memory. Maybe she saw tamarin in the sky. Maybe she remembered old evenings like this, far from Earth, with family now light years away. Or maybe she was simply grateful for the tower, for her team, for the stillness tonight had offered her heart. Whatever she saw, it lingered in her eyes like starlight refusing to fade. One by one, the others slowly began to move. Not with reluctance, but with care, like walking away from the final notes of a song. Cushions were quietly adjusted, blankets gently folded. Not a word spoken, a need. The room had said everything for them. Starfire remained behind a moment longer. She gathered the cups, not rushed, stacking them with a quiet grace. Her fingers lingered on the teapot, now cold to the touch, and she smiled. Not sadly, not longingly, but with fullness. The kind of smile someone wears when they know they've created something beautiful, not for show, but for love. The glowing creature blinked awake, stretched once, and padded quietly behind her as she moved to the shelf. Everything went back in its place, the cloth folded, the tray returned, the candle blown out with a gentle breath. One flame, then two, then three. And just like that, the room dimmed. Not empty, not gone. Just resting. Starfire turned back before she left, her hand resting on the doorway for a moment. She looked at the space, now darkened and quiet, and nodded once. A silent thank you, not just to the room, but to what the night had become. Then she stepped out, closing the curtain gently behind her. The soft fabric swayed in her wake. Behind it, the warmth remained not in heat or sound, but in feeling, in memory. A soft glow in the heart of the tower. A moment kept alive not by flame or sound, but by the peace it planted in every soul who stepped into it. Because sometimes the truest form of strength isn't found in battle cries or power. Sometimes it lives in the gentle pour of tea, in the sharing of stillness, in the presence of quiet love. And that Starfire gave freely, with every heartbeat. Later that night, as shadows settled fully across the bay, and the stars above began to pulse like faraway lullabies, another corner of Titan's tower began to glow, not with brightness, but with warmth. The kind of warmth that didn't come from lights or candles, but from comfort, from something deeply familiar, like the feeling of a favorite blanket or the last few pages of a story you've read 100 times. Beast Boy's room was quieter than usual. Gone were the blinking game consoles and the dramatic soundtracks of galactic battles. Tonight there was no roar of engines or pixelated explosions. Instead there was a hum, soft and steady, like a calm heartbeat beneath the floorboards. His space, usually electric and animated, had slowed, shifted, settled. A single lamp glowed in the corner, its shade casting a warm amber across the room. The walls, lined with shelves of odd knickknacks and action figures, now seemed to lean inward gently, like they too were listening. Plush animals, each one different, and somehow a little magical in its own right, lined the edges of a reading nook built beneath the window. They weren't just decorations, they had stories. Some gifted, some found, some maybe transformed by Beast Boy himself in moments of quiet joy. He sat cross-legged on a soft rug, an oversized book resting in his lap. It was well-loved, the edges worn, the spine faded, the cover creased from years of reading and rereading. But that made it perfect. Because sometimes the most treasured stories aren't the ones that are new. They're the ones that remember you, the ones that feel like home. The room smelled faintly of cocoa and something woody, maybe, the old cedar toy chest in the corner, or maybe a memory lingering in the fibers of the rug. Either way, the scent wrapped itself around the space like a soft arm over the shoulder. Outside the window, the moon had climbed higher, its light brushing against the glass, like the slow hand of sleep. Tiny waves lapped at the rocks below the tower, each one like a whisper, and above it all the stars blinked patiently, like they too were waiting for the story to begin. Beast Boy turned a page. The sound was small, but in the stillness, it echoed gently the flutter of worn paper, like the wings of a bird settling into its nest. The illustrations on the page shimmered just a little, not from any enchantment, but from love, the way old pages catch light when someone truly cares. And he read. Not aloud, not for show, but with his whole heart. The kind of reading that slows your breathing, the kind where the rhythm of the words becomes a lullaby, the kind where you forget the world around you, not because it disappears, but because it finally feels gentle enough to fade into the background. The plush animals leaned a little closer. One with floppy ears seemed to smile under the lamplight. Another, a tiny stitched giraffe, slumped into the pillow as if it too had heard the first sentence and already began to dream. It wasn't a heroic tale tonight. No dragons to be slain, no kingdoms to rescue. Tonight's story was simpler, about a little creature trying to find where it belonged, a wanderer in a wide, soft world, searching not for glory, but for a place to rest, for a friend, for a light in the dark. Beast Boy's eyes followed each word with the gentle focus of someone who wasn't just reading, he was remembering. Not the plot, but the feeling of being held by a story when everything else felt too big, of hearing, even in fiction, the quiet reassurance that it's okay to be soft. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to just be. He smiled faintly, not because the story was funny, but because it was kind. And kindness, in a world that so often rushed and shouted, felt like the greatest gift of all. Another page turn, slower this time. The room grew quieter still. Even the tower, vast and steel wall, seemed to breathe in rhythm with him. Now the pipes humming gently in the walls, the air vents sighing like they, too, were dozing. A pillow shifted. A plush raccoon, fuzzy and overstuffed, had fallen over in the corner. Beast Boy reached out and gently propped it back up, tucking it against a stack of others, like a parent making sure every child was tucked in before the night fully claimed them. There was something sacred in these tiny gestures. No battle, no transformation, no wild joke or loud entrance. Just stillness. Just care. Beast Boy leaned back, book still open, eyes growing heavier. He wasn't done yet. But he didn't need to rush. This story, like this night, didn't demand to be finished. It just wanted to be felt. And in this quiet corner of Titan's tower, under the slow arc of the moon, surrounded by old toys and warm pages and a sky full of stars, it was felt deeply. The story wound onward, but time seemed to slow. Every paragraph unfolded like a dream drifting downstream, soft, fluid, unhurried. The words carried something more than plot. They carried quiet. They carried peace. Beast Boy leaned further back into the cushions, one hand still resting gently on the open pages, as if holding the story in place was enough to keep the moment from slipping away. The weight of the book, the hush of the room, and the tender way the lamplight kissed the edges of his surrounding, it all wrapped around him like the ending of a lullaby. The plush toys sat in quiet assembly around him. Not just an audience, but companions. Each one a tiny witness to the ritual of night. A pink bunny with one ear bent leaned against a tiny makeshift tent made of blankets and comic books. A round bear with mismatched button eyes looked as though it had seen 1,000 nights like this and still waited for the next with the same quiet hope. The pages turned again. Outside, the wind had picked up not fierce but curious, tapping gently at the windows like it too wanted in. The stars blinked patiently overhead. Their glow seemed softer now, like even the sky was dimming its light to match the peace unfolding below. The little creature in the story, the wanderer, had found shelter in a hollow tree. Not a castle, not a grand hall, just a tree, dry, warm, and welcoming. A place with no expectations, no judgments. Just space to breathe, space to rest. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was enough for tonight. Beast Boy closed the book part way and let it rest against his chest. Not fully shut, as if to tell the story. I'll be back. His eyes fluttered once, then again. And for a moment he didn't move. The room didn't either. It was in this in-between, not quite asleep, not fully awake, that something magical always settled over the tower. The kind of silence that felt alive, not empty, but filled with unseen softness. A breath held by the universe itself. A pause before the dream. He let out a slow sigh, the kind that shakes loose whatever weight might have lingered from the day. The kind that doesn't need to be explained, only exhaled. And in that breath, the story continued. Not on the page, but inside him. That's the thing about bedtime tales. They don't always end when the book closes. They echo, They bloom. They plant themselves like tiny seeds inside the heart, waiting to grow into dreams. A soft creak whispered from the hallway, the sound of someone walking gently past. Maybe checking in, maybe just listening. No interruption, no words, just quiet confirmation that this was a safe night, a good one worth protecting. The tower, in its own way, always knew how to cradle its own. The plush giraffe tipped slightly and came to rest against the beast boy's leg. He shifted only enough to keep it from falling, even now half asleep. Eyes fading, his instinct to care never dimmed. The lamp dimmed a little, flickering gently with the soft hum of the electrical flow slowing down for the night. Its golden glow turned amber, then something softer still like honey left out in moonlight. And for the first time that evening, the world felt completely still. Not silent in the way empty rooms are silent, but in the way forests hush just before dawn, in the way oceans hold their breath between waves, in the way children curl into blankets when the last sentence of a beloved book fades into memory. In this gentle stillness, Beast Boy's breathing matched the rhythm of the sea outside. He didn't need a dream to carry him tonight. The story had already done that. As the night deepened, time became something gentle, not a ticking clock, but a soft current drifting slowly through the tower. Each moment passed without hurry, dissolving into the next like ripples on still water. Beast Boy, now completely relaxed, had let the weight of the day dissolve into the pages of the story he just read. The book, still slightly open on his chest, rose and fell gently with each breath. The cover had cooled slightly against his shirt, the pages fluttering ever so slightly from the nearby vent, as if the story itself was breathing along with him. Not finished, not forgotten, just resting. And rest is what the room had become. A place not just for sleep, but for softness. A sanctuary. The kind that grows from quiet rituals and quiet hearts. Around him, the plush animals still watched, unmoving but somehow always aware. They weren't just decorations tonight, they were part of the moment. Silent friends holding space for peace. Outside, the moon had reached its highest arc in the sky, casting down a thread of silver that painted the waves and touched the windows of the tower. The glass caught the light and bent it softly into the room, casting pale reflections that drifted lazily across the walls like ghostly butterflies moving in rhythm with the wind. Below, the bay was utterly still. Not a boat stirred, not a single gull called. The world beyond Titan's tower seemed to have taken a cue from Beast Boy's room to pause, to hush, to rest. And somewhere in the distance, faint and far, came the sound of a train horn. Not loud, not jarring, just distant enough to feel like a memory. A reminder that the world outside was still turning, but it didn't need you to keep up. Not right now. Not while this story was still being felt. Beast Boy's eyes, barely open now, caught the shimmer of stars on the ceiling. Not real stars, just tiny decals that glowed faintly in the dark. Remnants of younger nights, of childhood evenings spent gazing up in wonder. He hadn't removed them. Maybe never would. Some things don't outgrow you. Some things are too woven into your soul to ever leave. And in a way, that made this moment even more perfect. He shifted slightly, turning to his side, curling instinctively into the shape we all seem bound to take when sleep truly calls. One arm draped loosely across the book, one leg tucked beneath a pillow, the other pressing lightly against the fuzzy plush bear whose one eye winked toward the ceiling. The room sighed with him, not loudly. Just a soft hush, the sound of warm air moving gently through a safe space. The kind of sound that fills a room when nothing else is needed. No voices, no music. Just breath. Just night. The book now rested more fully against the rug. Its pages stayed open, resting on the final paragraph of the night. The last line glowed faintly beneath the dim light, a single sentence full of quiet truth. Sometimes finding a place to rest is the bravest adventure of all. And with that, even the story seemed to close its eyes. Somewhere down the hall, the tower's automated systems dimmed another set of lights, not abruptly, but as if even the walls respected the softness of this night. A hush, slow and respectful, swept through the building. Cyborg's tech lab dark. The kitchen dark. Robin's training room silent. The rooftop now only watched by the stars. And down in the Beast Boy's room, everything had come to a gentle pause. The kind of pause you don't interrupt. The kind you only find once in a while. The kind you protect. A soft click came from a nightlight in the far corner, a tiny turtle-shaped lamp that blinked on automatically. Its glow was barely enough to see by. But that was the point. It was just enough to say, "You're not alone." And he wasn't. Not truly. The tower, with all its rooms and corners and quirks, held each of the titans tonight like a lighthouse in the fog. A quiet keeper of dreams. A silent witness to the rare magic that happens not during battles or missions, but in moments like this. When laughter has faded. When stories are finished. When hearts are still and safe. The plush animals leaned gently together, their seams creaking ever so slightly as if settling in for their own sleep. Beast Boy didn't move. Didn't need to. The night had taken him gently into its arms. And outside, the stars kept watch. Not blinking fast, not dancing, just holding their places in the sky with the patience of things that have always been. Things that understand what it means to simply be there. This wasn't just a bedtime. It was a moment suspended in stillness. A breath the world had taken. A pause that mattered. And in the middle of it, a boy who could become anything chose to become still. Somewhere in the background, the soft, steady hum of the tower's systems pulsed like a heartbeat, low and warm, like the distant echo of comfort. It was the kind of sound that didn't disturb silence, but deepened it, filled it. If silence were a blanket, this was the gentle stitching that held it together. Time had become feather-light now, nearly weightless. Each second passed like snowflakes, landing on a windowsill, quiet, vanishing, beautiful. Beast Boy, still curled beside his storybook and stuffed animals, breathed in rhythm with that slow time, no longer thinking, no longer holding on to anything from the day. This wasn't just the absence of noise. This was presence, the rare kind. The kind of presence that exists when the body is at peace, the mind untroubled, and the spirit for once has nothing to chase, no battle to plan for, no joke to deflect with, no reason to transform into anything other than exactly what he was. The boy who needed rest. The boy who had made space for softness. A gentle flicker from the nightlight gave off a faint glimmer across the polished floor. It caught the edge of a stray comic book, the spine of a forgotten game controller, and the faded corner of a poster still taped to the wall. Each one told a story of fun, of youth, of memories made when no one was watching. But tonight, they were all quiet too, just witnesses to this rare stillness. And above Beast Boy's resting form, the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling had fully charged. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. They formed no particular constellation. No scientific map. Just chaos. Beautiful, accidental chaos. A sky of dreams made by a younger version of himself, the kind of sky that didn't need to make sense to feel right. It was a universe built not from astronomy, but from imagination. And really, what better sky could there be for someone like him? Down the hallway, the tower stood in silence. Starfire's teacups had long been rinsed and stacked. Robin's notepad now rested face down beside a closed laptop. Raven's door remained sealed but still warm with the residual calm that always settled in when the day didn't demand more from her. And Cyborg? His room blinked quietly with scattered blue LEDs, tiny fireflies of tech buzzing low like background dreams. Even the systems he'd programmed to keep watch over the night were now in their resting phase, aware but not active, present but not overbearing. And in the middle of it all, Beast Boy's room still breathed like a sanctuary. A soft shiver rustled his blanket, not from cold, but from the weightlessness that sleep brings. He didn't wake, just adjusted. Subconsciously tugged the blanket closer to his shoulder. His thumb brushed lightly against the corner of the book. The page still open, the words still visible. Sometimes finding a place to rest is the bravest adventure of all. He hadn't meant to memorize it, but he had. Outside, the sky had deepened into that specific kind of black that only appears after midnight, not empty, but infinite. The stars twinkled faintly, and the moon now began its slow descent, tracing its way toward the water. Reflections danced gently along the waves like a lullaby without words, humming just for those who knew how to listen. From high above, Titan's tower stood tall, but not cold. The building didn't feel like metal tonight. Didn't feel like glass. It felt like a home. One filled with rooms that held more than furniture, rooms that held history, safety, and the sacred ritual of rest. And in one of those rooms, a quiet, green boy slept without armor, without jokes, without transformation. Just himself, whole, soft, still. This was not a grand finale. There was no dramatic close, no thunder or spark or flourish, just the gentle fade of light across the walls, just the sound of sleep, just the embrace of night holding him gently in its arms. And as the final moments of this chapter passed, the book resting beside him seemed to settle deeper into the blanket. The words it held would still be there tomorrow. The adventure wasn't over. But tonight, just tonight, it had done its job. The pages had carried him, carried the room, carried us all into stillness, into sleep, into peace. And so, beneath the ceiling of glowing plastic stars and a blanket of silence that covered the whole tower like snow, Beast Boy finally let go. No worries, no weight, just dreams, drifting, softly, gently, home. Somewhere deeper within Titan's tower, where the hallways narrow and the lights glow just a little dimmer, Raven's room stood undisturbed. Her door, as always, was closed not out of coldness, but of care. She had long mastered the subtle art of holding space for herself, for stillness, for the energy of the tower to settle and breathe without interruption. Inside, the air was different. Not cold, just calm, like a pond untouched by wind. Time moved more slowly here, or at least it felt that way. Not because of magic, but because of mindfulness. The kind that doesn't demand silence, but invites it. A single candle flickered from her bedside table, tall, thin. The flame curved gently to one side as if bowing to the quiet. Its light danced across the spines of well-worn books stacked in neat towers. Each one had been opened 100 times. Some pages curled from steam, others from old rain, none of them decorative, all of them sacred in their own way. Tonight, like so many before, Raven prepared for sleep in her own rhythm, steady, deliberate. The world outside could spin in whatever direction it chose. But here, in this space, everything slowed to the pace of a breath. She stood at the center of the room, surrounded by a careful circle of small obsidian stones, each one placed with thought, each one humming softly with energy that didn't need to be loud to be felt. The circle wasn't for defense, Not tonight. It wasn't a barrier, but a boundary. A gentle line drawn between the chaos of the world and the stillness of the soul. In her hands, a small bowl made of tarnished silver. Inside, lavender, chamomile, crushed mint leaves. Scents that didn't just smell peaceful, they became peace. The way a lullaby becomes silence long after the final note. She knelt. The floor beneath her softened by a faded woven mat, deep purple with threads of silver running through it like moonlight caught in the fabric. The pattern wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was something old, something hers, something worn into shape by years of quiet use. With one hand, she stirred the herbs. With the other, she closed her eyes. No word spoken, no grand gestures. Just breath slow, deliberate, deep. In, hold, out. Again and again. Each breath a thread, weaving together her presence, bringing the day's scattered thoughts into stillness, pulling loose the invisible knots that the world always tried to tie. In one corner of the room, a crystal sphere pulsed with a slow rhythm, synced to her breath, not glowing, not flashing, just pulsing, like a heartbeat outside the body. Its light stretched across the walls, casting faint shapes that shifted, like clouds, familiar, formless, gentle. And above her, the ceiling seemed deeper than it had any right to be, like a dome of midnight, speckled faintly with the same stars Beast Boy had watched earlier. But here they weren't stickers. They were reflections, mirrored fragments from her own spellwork, suspended just above, glowing faintly with inner light. They shifted slowly, not to show the passing of time, but to remind her that time didn't own her here. The calming spell wasn't dramatic. It didn't crackle. It didn't surge. It settled, like dust in a sunbeam, like snow on a windowsill. It filled the space in small, invisible ways, clearing the mind, softening the heart, untangling the emotional threads that even Raven sometimes didn't know had tightened. The herbs in the bowl began to release a soft warmth now. Not smoke, just a gentle steam, curling upward in ghost-like ribbons that faded before reaching the ceiling. They didn't need to reach. Their purpose was already complete. And within that circle of stones, Raven breathed. She didn't chase thoughts away. She let them come, then let them go. One by one, they floated past, some shaped like memories, others like unfinished conversations, silent worries, fragments of dreams she hadn't yet dreamt. She didn't cling to them, didn't fear them, just acknowledged, then released. Like autumn leaves in water, drifting, then gone. This was more than a ritual, more than a spell. It was restoration. The rare, deliberate act of choosing peace, not waiting for it, not hoping it would arrive, but making it stone by stone, breath by breath, intention by intention. And outside her room, the tower honored that silence. No door creaked, no light flickered. The world around her teammates and tech and tides alike seemed to pause and bow gently in respect. Even the sea below had quieted, as if the spell had reached farther than the walls, smoothing the waves, calming the moonlight, reminding the stars to hush. The candle's flame, once tall and crisp, had begun to shrink now, a soft dip in its arc, the wax pooling slowly around its base like melted memory. Its light no longer reached the far corners of the room, but that was all right. Darkness didn't frighten Raven. It never had. If anything, it was in shadow that she found her clearest reflection, a mirror that didn't demand smiles or explanations, just presence. A soft wind stirred, not from a window, but from within. The spell had begun to settle into the very bones of the space, like warmth spreading from a fire not yet seen. The stones around her glimmered faintly, not glowing outright, but carrying a quiet resonance, like the final hum of a piano key, long after it's been struck. In this moment, Raven didn't float above the world. She didn't disappear. She became part of it, threaded into the fabric of the night, like ink bleeding gently through parchment, quiet, steady, permanent, in the most delicate way. A small charm hung above her mirror, a crescent-shaped piece of obsidian, wrapped in wire, balanced on a black thread. It moved slightly now, swaying in rhythm with the pulse of the room. It had no magical function, not in the traditional sense. It was just grounding, a reminder of how far she'd come, a piece of her story that didn't need to be told aloud to carry weight. Beneath her, the woven mat shifted slightly as she exhaled. Another breath, deep and purposeful. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the silver bowl. The herbs had cooled now, their scent faded into the air, not lost, but absorbed. The kind of peace that didn't need to linger, because it had already become. Outside, clouds moved across the sky with slow grace, like thoughts across a settling mind. And even the moon, once bold in its climb, now dipped low toward the sea content, almost sleepy, casting its silver across the ocean like a final exhale before rest. From this angle, high above the waterline, Titan's tower looked like it was part of the sky, its silhouette mirrored in the ocean below, surrounded by stars both real and reflected. And at its very heart, where Raven sat in silence, the whole building seemed to pulse with something rare and gentle, stillness. Her hands folded in her lap now, no longer forming signs or drawing energy, just resting as they should, as they deserved. The calming spell was complete. There had been no need for incantation, no swirling lights, no booming cymbals, just the choice to find stillness, to hold it, to let it hold her back. And in that space, with nothing left to do, she finally stood, slowly, carefully, the kind of care you give to something sacred. Her legs remembered the floor beneath them. Her breath found its rhythm again. One by one, she began to collect the stones, each one placed gently into a small velvet pouch. Not rush, not routine, but ritual. The simple, quiet act of honoring what had served its purpose. The candle she snuffed out with a pinch of her fingers, twisting the wick slightly to preserve it for tomorrow. The silver bowl was placed on a shelf beside a tiny jar of dried roses petals, long faded to dusky pink, still fragrant with the memory of old, gentle spells. The lights remained low. Even now, the space didn't return to silence. It was silence-shaped, felt, lived in. And as Raven moved toward her bed, her cloak trailing behind her like a slow tide, she didn't carry the day with her. She left it behind in the bowl, in the breathwork, in the circle. Letting go wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was as simple as walking quietly, knowing you no longer needed to carry what once weighed you down. She pulled back the covers with a practiced grace, the sheets cool and smooth beneath her hands. A book rested on her pillow, one she hadn't read yet, but already felt familiar, the kind of book you choose on a feeling, not a synopsis. She placed it aside for now. Not tonight. Tonight wasn't for stories written by others. Tonight was for her own. Outside the window, a single star blinked just a little brighter. Maybe a plane, maybe a planet, maybe nothing at all. But it didn't matter, it was enough. Enough to catch the eye. Enough to remind her that, even in the vastness of space, there are anchors of light. And tonight, she was one of them. The sheets welcomed her like an old friend, cool at first touch, then softening under her warmth. No armor, no spells, no shields, just skin against cloth, breath against breath, thought against silence. Raven didn't toss or turn. She simply folded herself into the bed as though the mattress had been shaped exactly for her, and perhaps, over the years, it had. Above her, the charm hanging from the mirror gave one final sway before becoming still. Its thread stopped quivering. The crystals quieted. The room had become a sealed chamber of peace, untouched by urgency or time. If any thoughts lingered, they were kind ones, gentle visitors who didn't need to be solved, only acknowledged and left to drift. The city beyond the ocean was far away now. Its hum, its movement, its flashes of neon all dimmed behind the thick walls of the tower and the thicker curtain of peace that Raven had woven with her quiet ritual. She had not cut herself off from the world. She had simply chosen a softer channel, a slower frequency, one that pulsed like a lullaby few could hear, but those who could would never forget. In the distance, a seagull called out once a lonely sound, quickly swallowed by the wind. It did not disturb her. It became part of the quiet. A tiny string in the wide tapestry of night. Even the breeze outside shifted, as if stepping lighter now, tiptoeing past her window in respect. Somewhere down the hallway, faint laughter echoed. Likely from Beast Boy. Perhaps a joke shared too late, or a movie quote retold one too many times. But even that sound, distant and muffled, carried no disruption. It folded itself into the harmony of the moment, like a note at the edge of a symphony's end. She heard it, smiled inwardly, and let it go. Raven didn't seek sleep. She invited it slowly. Like steam rising from a cup of tea, her awareness began to drift upward, then dissolve. Her eyes closed, not with weariness, but with ease. There was no sudden drop into unconsciousness, just a fading, a dimming, a glide into something softer than dreaming. She did not fear the dreams tonight. She welcomed them. Because tonight, she had claimed her stillness, forged it with intention, crafted it with grace, and whatever came next, whether vision or shadow, would be met not with resistance, but with readiness. Even in her rest, she remained Raven, composed, grounded, layered like ink and dusk, complex and calm all at once. Outside, the sky had turned to velvet. Midnight had passed, slipping quietly into the next day without fanfare. And over the horizon, the stars continued their gentle rotation, slow, patient, as if watching over her sleep with ancient, silent eyes. There was a magic in this kind of night, not the kind found in scrolls or spells, but the kind made from presence, from choice, from release. And so the tower stood tall, silent, steady. Its glow dimmed to match the sky. From the outside, one might think nothing was happening. But within, in that quiet room tucked between steel and sea, something sacred had taken place. Peace. Real peace. The kind that cannot be forced, only found. And at its center, Raven rested her breathing soft, her presence undisturbed, her soul cradled not by magic, but by her own making. Sleep did not take her. She gave herself to it, freely. Far beneath her, the waves kissed the base of Titan's tower rhythmic, patient, as if nature itself was keeping watch. Their sound echoed faintly through the foundation, a lullaby older than language. They came and went in cycles, like breath, like thought, like dreams. On the tower's rooftop, a few lights still flickered gentle glows from stargazing equipment, or small garden lanterns swaying on thin poles. But none of it disturbed her. Everything was in balance now. Every corner of this great home, from Cyborg's humming systems to Starfire's glowing nightlights, had fallen into rhythm. The Titans weren't at war tonight. They weren't defending the city or saving the world. They were simply resting. And in this rare pause, Raven's room became more than a refuge. It became a symbol, a quiet testament to the importance of stillness, to the courage it takes to slow down, to the wisdom of listening inward instead of always reaching outward. In sleep, she did not vanish. She shimmered. Somewhere in the dim corners of her consciousness, thoughts rose and fell, not in chaos, but in harmony. Memories drifted like soft feathers across water. A warm book she never finished. The scent of tea brewing in the common room. A single rose pressed between journal pages. All of it folded together in her dream space, making something whole from all the fragments. And the shadows that once loomed at the edge of her mind, they too had softened. They didn't disappear. Raven never expected them to. But they stepped back, giving her space, respecting the quiet she had carved for herself. They weren't enemies tonight, just echoes. Old parts of a self she had long since learned to carry without fear. Below the windowsill, her spell book remained closed. She hadn't needed it this time. Sometimes the most powerful spells are the ones that don't require words, only presence, only breath. And so, in the deep hours before dawn, Raven became part of something larger than herself. Not the tower, not the team, not the world outside, but the quiet pulse of life itself, steady, true, timeless. If you were to peek into the room, you wouldn't see anything grand. You'd simply see a girl, cloaked in shadows and moonlight, resting peacefully under a soft blanket, her hand curled slightly beneath her chin, as if protecting a dream. But if you looked closer, if you felt the room, you'd understand the depth of what had taken place here. You'd feel the energy, not loud, not wild, but sacred. The kind of peace that doesn't need to explain itself. The kind that reminds you that even warriors need stillness. Even those who walk through darkness must also learn to rest in light. And as the first threads of dawn began to weave into the sky, pale hues brushing gently against the horizon, Raven remained untouched by the coming day. There would be time for movement soon, for missions, for laughter, for flight, but not yet. For now, the tower stayed hushed. And in its heart, Raven slept whole, steady, and completely at peace. While the rest of the tower had settled into a deep and peaceful slumber, high above in the tech wing, a faint, steady hum pulsed through the dark. Soft lights flickered like stars across screens, blinking gently in hues of cobalt blue and muted amber. Amidst the cool glow and quiet buzz of electronics, a single space remained alive with thought, not hurried, not frantic, but quietly alive. This was Cyborg's domain. Unlike the comforting clutter of the living quarters or the moody minimalism of Raven's room, this space carried a different kind of serenity, one made not of silence, but of subtle vibration, of harmony between circuitry and soul. It was not chaos, it was design, precision. And somewhere within it, something was dreaming, not a person, not a program, but a creation. A dream machine forged with care and vision, humming softly like a lullaby written in code. Nestled among the curved walls of polished metal and gently looping wires, Cyborg lay reclined in a chair shaped perfectly to fit the contours of his hybrid form. His body, half human, half tech, appeared still, but his mind moved deeper, farther inward. A gentle pulse emanated from the interface around him. No wires, no harsh restraints, just a field, a soft halo of connection between thought and machine. The dream machine wasn't new. But tonight, it wasn't a project. It was a portal. Within its memory banks lay a garden, not one built with dirt and seed, but one composed of light and rhythm. A space where steel trees bore holographic fruit and glass koi swam in artificial ponds beneath a digital sky. It wasn't reality, but it wasn't fake either. It was real in the way music is real. in the way emotion is real. It existed because it meant something. And tonight, the machine had tuned itself to Cyborg's heartbeat. Each thump was a signal. Each breath, a command. As he drifted, a pathway unfolded in front of him. Not a hallway, not a road, wide and warm, glowing faintly at the edges. It was a place without rules, a place designed not for utility, but for feeling. Here he could run without getting tired. Here he could dance without noise. Here he could laugh without echo. And he did. Not with sound, but with joy that rippled through the code like a soft tremor of light. The machine responded, reshaping the landscape with every thought. A mountain of sound, a sky of memory, a floor made of polished childhood. The colors shifted constantly, not fast, not frantic, just enough to remind him this was his place, his rhythm, his world. Outside the machine, the tower stood motionless. But inside this cocoon of thought and dream, Cyborg was in motion, dancing not with limbs, but with intention. The room around him pulsed in time, a slow, deliberate beat. Like the heart of the tower itself had synced with his own. There was no fear, no alerts, no incoming transmissions, only music, soft, slow, deep. The kind you feel more than hear, the kind that knows where you've been. Floating through the dreamscape, he saw shapes from memory. Not literal ones, not photographs, but impressions. The hum of his favorite childhood song as reimagined by glowing waves in the air. The feel of warm street pavement under his sneakers, remapped as a bridge of shifting light. And somewhere, not too far in the distance, the scent of old engine oil and cocoa, his mother's kitchen, mixing with the garage in one perfectly impossible memory. This wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't about the past. It was about grounding. About reconnecting to all the parts of himself that sometimes blurred the boy and the builder, the teammate and the dreamer, the steel and the soul. He smiled in the way only dreamers do, not with lips, but with being. The dreamscape shifted again, not abruptly, but with a soft ripple, like wind gently brushing through a curtain. The landscape morphed into a wide-open field of shimmering hexagonal panels, each one pulsing with memory. They lit up as he moved past them, like stepping stones of the soul. One glowed warm with the laughter of his teammates during a movie night. Another sparked bright with the memory of fixing a busted T-car engine under a summer sun. Each panel was a piece of him lived, felt, remembered. In this place, time wasn't linear. There was no ticking clock, no missions, no countdowns. There was only flow. He walked calmly through it, all the digital sky above, twinkling with stars that looked like motherboard circuits, constellations forming familiar shapes, a wrench, a gear, a stylized T. As he reached out his hand, a projection of light rose before him. Not a weapon, not a tool, but a piano, sleek, glowing softly in blue. He sat before it, his fingers hovering above the keys. He played. And the music that came forth was not complex, not rehearsed. It was simple, pure. Notes stretched across the space like beams of light, connecting sky to ground, past to present. As he played, the dream responded, glowing circuits on the trees, pixelated birds in the sky, all moving in rhythm. He wasn't controlling the dream. He was co-creating it. Here he didn't have to explain who he was. He didn't have to balance the duality of being man and machine. In this place, he just was. His mechanical half, so often the focus in battle and invention, didn't feel cold here. It felt harmonious. The humming energy that coursed through his limbs sang along with the melody. The lights on his arm softly pulsed with each note. A gentle breeze passed through the field even though there was no wind. The dream had created one for him because he imagined it, needed it. even if only unconsciously. The dream machine responded not to commands, but to emotion. It learned not through data, but empathy. And deep within its digital heart, it began to offer something unexpected comfort. Suddenly, the scene shifted again, not startling, but natural. He was no longer alone. The glowing figures of his teammates appeared, not detailed, not fully rendered, but warm, familiar outlines. Robin stood beside a tall beacon of light, looking upward, ever focused. Starfire glowed softly, like a star made flesh. Raven's shadowy silhouette stood beside a flickering flame. Beast Boy sat cross-legged on a floating rock, surrounded by playful green sparks. They didn't speak. They didn't move. But they were there. And somehow, that was enough. Cyborg reached toward them, not to touch, but to acknowledge. These weren't simulations. They weren't ghosts or projections. They were feelings, truths encoded in memory. Their presence in his dream wasn't artificial. It was real because they mattered, because they were part of him. And then, just beyond the hill of code-laced grass, something new rose, not crafted by him, but born from within the machine itself. A dome, smooth, silent. Its surface reflected every glowing color in the dream. He stepped forward, drawn not by curiosity, but by something deeper trust. As he entered the dome, the air thickened slightly, not with pressure, but with presence. Inside, everything was quiet. No music. No lights. Just stillness. And in that stillness, Cyborg saw his own reflection. Not split between man and metal, not fractured or dual, but whole. A perfect blend of all he was. A harmony of memory, machinery, muscle, and mind. For a moment, the dream paused as if even the machine was holding its breath. And then, slowly, without drama or flair, a warmth spread through the dome. Not from heaters or code, but from within. A kind of peace, so gentle it could only exist in sleep or in the hearts of those who'd finally made peace with themselves. Cyborg let it wrap around him. He didn't resist. Inside the dome, time slowed even further. There were no edges here, no control panels, no devices. Just smooth, continuous surfaces like a dream remembering itself. Everything glowed faintly, as though lit from the inside. And perhaps it was. Perhaps this was the part of the dream machine that didn't belong to wires or circuits or any known design. Perhaps this was the part that belonged entirely to Cyborg. A space only he could unlock. A space the machine had waited patiently to show him. And in the center of it, rising from the floor like a thought brought to life, was a small table. Simple, unassuming. Atop it rested something quiet. A photograph, the kind that didn't exist in digital archives or online albums. Not perfectly scanned, not backed up, just real. The colors slightly faded, the edges gently curled. The kind of photograph that carried fingerprints in its memories. In it, a boy smiling, whole stood between two beaming parents. The sun behind them turned everything golden. Cyborg stood before it, breathing in the moment. The dream had not invented this. It had remembered it with him. He sat slowly beside the table. His mechanical fingers hovered just above the photo, trembling ever so slightly. Not from fear, not from doubt, but from the kind of reverence one has for fragile things. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. The weight of the memory was enough. It pressed gently into his chest, grounding him in the truth of his own story. Here in the quiet of the dome, nothing had to be fixed. Nothing had to be upgraded or optimized. Here are the parts that made up his life, human and machine, joy and loss, set side by side, not in conflict, but in balance. The dome began to respond again, not with sound or movement, but with feeling. The walls shimmered faintly, shifting into soft gradients of lavender and dusk gold. The floor beneath him warmed slightly, not like a machine booting up, but like sun-warmed pavement beneath bare feet. And high above, the ceiling opened into a dome of stars, infinite, slow-turning, each one glowing with a memory all its own. One pulsed with his first successful rebuild of the tower's defense grid. Another twinkled with the sound of Beast Boy's laughter after a prank gone wrong. Yet another dimmer but steadier held the long night he once spent alone in the garage, building something just to feel less alone. All of it mattered. All of it was him. He closed his eyes, and when he did, the stars above him began to drift, not away, but toward him. Slowly, gently, one by one they descended like tiny fireflies, circling him in quiet reverence. They weren't just stars now, they were moments, feelings, achievements, mistakes, lessons, each one touching his skin, his armor, his memory, and vanishing softly into him. He breathed in, and for the first time in what felt like years, there was no division, no internal pinging, no low battery warnings, no contrast between flesh and circuit, only presence, only being. Outside the dome, the dreamscape continued to pulse in sync with him. Trees glowed, water shimmered. The piano still waited where he'd left it, silent now but content. The tower, still miles away in the waking world, echoed none of this, and yet it was all part of it. Everything was connected, not through wires or signals, but through memory, through intention. The dream machine had become something more. Not a tool, not an invention, a companion. A silent witness to the pieces of Cyborg that no one else ever truly saw, not out of secrecy, but because some things are too quiet, too personal, to share in the noise of the waking world. Here in this created piece, Cyborg was not the strategist, not the mechanic, not the fighter. He was the dreamer. He was the story beneath the armor. And for a little while longer, he chose to stay. The dome dimmed slowly like a setting sun bowing to the quiet of night. The memories that had danced as stars now nestled within Cyborg, no longer needing to glow outward because they had found their home inside him. He stood, not hurried, not reluctant, but ready. The dream hadn't ended. It had simply given him what he needed, not answers, not plans, but rest. Real, true rest. The kind that doesn't fix what's broken, but accepts that not everything needs fixing. As he stepped out of the dome, the field greeted him with open skies and soft digital winds. The piano was gone now, as if it had played its part and quietly taken its leave. In its place sat something else, a bench, simple, wooden, worn in all the right places, waiting not to be used, but to be appreciated. He sat, letting the virtual wind brush past his shoulders like an old friend. And across the horizon, the dream began its descent. The colors shifted from glowing teal and sky blue to deep purples and starlit navy. Fireflies made, not of code, but of quiet thought, blinked lazily through the tall, softly swaying grass. A gentle fog rolled in at the edges of the memory field, not to obscure, but to cradle. It was nearly time to wake. But the machine didn't rush him. It knew this moment was sacred. One final ripple moved across the dreamscape, not an event, but a feeling, a subtle reminder that what had been seen, felt, remembered here, would not be forgotten when the eyes opened, because it never truly had been forgotten. It had only needed the silence to rise again. And now that silence sang with meaning. Cyborg looked up one last time. Above him, a constellation glowed, shaped not like a circuit or a gear, but a heart. Not the biological kind, but the kind that represents something deeper. Commitment, courage, connection. It pulsed once, gently, like a nod from the universe itself. Then the machine silently, softly began to power down the dream layer. The stars withdrew. The grass folded back into smooth surfaces. The bench dissolved like mist at morning. And Cyborg, still at peace, still whole, felt himself gently rising, not jolted awake, not shaken, just lifted, as though the dream itself was carrying him back, careful not to disturb the calm it had gifted him. And then, with a sound softer than a whisper, his consciousness returned to the real world. Back in Titan's tower, his body stirred in his charging pod. A tiny flicker of movement, a twitch of his fingers, a deep exhale through his nose. The soft glow of circuitry on his chest pulsed once more. But this time, it wasn't just mechanical. It felt alive. The room around him was quiet. Only the faint humming of the tower's systems moved through the silence. But inside him, there was music still. Not loud, not insistent, but present. A quiet melody, made not of notes, but of meaning. He remained still for a moment, savoring the afterglow of the dream. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't move. He simply let it be. And that was enough. Beyond his room, the tower continued to rest. Soft footsteps pattered in distant halls. A faint clinking of cups in the kitchen. The last flickers of light in the common room's television. The Tima's family safe, at peace. In his heart, he carried the field, the piano, the dome. Not because he needed to escape to them again, but because he had finally understood that they were never separate from him to begin with. They had always been part of him, always waiting to be remembered. As he drifted back into lighter sleep, not dreaming this time, but simply resting, a single, soft blue light pulsed gently at the edge of his charging chamber. The dream machine, silent again, but not dormant, not forgotten, just waiting, because it knew that one day, when the world got heavy and the noise too loud again, its doors would be open once more. And in that quiet field of memory, Victor Stone would once again sit at the piano of his soul and remember who he truly was. Night had wrapped itself around Titan's tower like a soft velvet blanket. Far beyond the bustle of city lights, the island stood in stillness, kissed by the rhythmic hush of waves lapping gently against its rocky shore. The sky above was a canvas of navy ink, dusted with stars that blinked slowly as if even they were getting ready to sleep. A light breeze swayed the tall palms just outside, and their whispering leaves harmonized with the distant hum of the tower's soft power core. Inside, a hush had settled. Not the kind born from emptiness, but from rest, from peace, from the exhale that only comes when every heart in a home feels safe. Somewhere down the dim hallway, the lights that once danced from arcade machines had faded into glowing sleep mode. Controllers were left where they were dropped mid-game, forgotten in the comfort of deep cushions and half-finished laughter. A tiny bowl of popcorn remained on the corner of the table, untouched, cold, but content in its own little way. The tower wasn't just quiet, it was at ease. One by one, the rooms had dimmed. Behind closed doors, the Titans had slowly given in to the weight of their own stillness. Not in a sudden plunge, but in waves like candles, slowly flickering out as the wind passed gently through. In Starfire's room, the glow of floating lights had dimmed to a soft coral hue, bathing her peaceful space in warmth. The teacups, now empty, still held the memory of laughter and lavender steam. Her long silken drapes swayed just slightly, catching moonlight and letting it trail lazily across the floor like spilled stardust. Just down the corridor, the soft sounds of digital systems ticking down filled Cyborg's room. The dream machine rested dormant but not forgotten, casting a faint, steady blue light against the wall, like a lighthouse guiding a ship that had already reached its harbor. The soft, rhythmic blinking of his chest light matched his slow, even breaths. For the first time in days, even his mind, usually cluttered with circuits and schedules, lay completely still. In Raven's quarters, the air was different, deeper, quieter, wrapped in a kind of silence that had a weight to it. Her book still lay open, its pages stilled mid-thought, while a single candle burned low beside her bed, its flame flickering as if trying to whisper something into the dream space. The shadows in the corners of the room didn't creep or loom, they simply rested too, folded in, like a cat curled beneath a window. And Beast Boy, always the last to settle, had finally stopped shifting. Nestled in his hammock, now tangled in a blanket that had clearly lost a battle with gravity, his breathing was slow, his form peaceful. Somewhere in his dream, he was probably still mid-adventure, bounding through alien forests or racing a turtle across the moon. But his body, here in the quiet of the tower, had found its anchor. His little nightlight glowed green beside him, steady and soft, casting faint dinosaur shapes on the ceiling. The entire tower breathed in unison. No alarms, no missions, no interruptions. And somewhere in the heart of it all, beyond the bedrooms, past the training rooms, beneath the tech labs, the tower's central core pulsed gently, humming a lullaby only the building itself could hear. A low, comforting sound, not mechanical, not artificial, but something else, something alive. Because the tower built from steel and glass, forged with vision and battle and memory, had become something more. It was a home. And homes remember things. They remember footsteps, arguments, celebrations, apologies. They remember the light that slants across the floor just before dusk, and the way certain doors creak a little when it rains. They remember who belongs inside them. Tonight, Titan's Tower remembered peace. It remembered laughter shared in the kitchen over midnight snacks. It remembered the rare silence during meditation sessions. It remembered every small act of care that its walls had witnessed, the quiet check-ins, the casual hand on a shoulder, the silence standing by someone's side when they needed it most. Tonight, it carried all of that like a lullaby that echoed through every hallway and every room, guiding each Titan deeper into slumber. Not because they were tired, but because they were home. The moon outside stood high now, with silver light, gently touching the windows of the tower like a hand, reaching down from the heavens just to say, "You're safe here." Inside the common room, once the heartbeat of the day's energy, only traces of that energy lingered. Pillows scattered across the floor held impressions of earlier laughter. The oversized screen that once glowed with cartoons and action now rested in standby, quietly reflecting the stars outside. The fridge, having survived one last raid from Beast Boy, hummed contentedly in the background, its own version of a sigh after a long day of snacks and scavenging. There was no rush now, no need for alertness, no missions to interrupt the silence. Just the sound of gentle, rhythmic breathing from rooms and hallways, from behind half-closed doors and cozy blanket forts. Even the tower's rooftop, so often visited under stars for quiet thoughts and deep conversations, remained untouched tonight. The wind swept across its metal surface, but found no one waiting there. It simply moved on, like a page turning in a bedtime story. Robin's room, the final light to dim, had gone quiet as well. His chair sat, angled near the window, a book resting open on the armrest, long forgotten. His boots were neatly placed by the bed, one just slightly off from the other, betraying the moment of exhaustion when he'd finally let go of the day. His mask rested on the nightstand, folded with care. In that space, stripped of roles and responsibility, there was only a boy, not a leader, not a warrior, just someone who had given the day everything he had, and now had finally allowed himself to rest. Above him, and above the entire team, the tower stood vigilant, not because it had to, but because it always did. Lights gently pulsed in systems far beneath the surface, like the slow heartbeat of a giant asleep, but dreaming. The tower was alive, not with energy or sound, but with memory, with presence, with love. And the island outside, that lonely patch of land surrounded by water on all sides, cradled them all like a secret the world had agreed to keep. The waves whispered against the shore, not with urgency, but rhythm, the kind of rhythm that lulls you slowly, deeply, into a sleep that knows no fear. Even the stars above, once bright and shimmering, now seemed to dim just a little, as if they too wanted to rest. Their glow softened, their edges blurred in the sky, becoming part of the backdrop rather than the centerpiece. It was their way of honoring the night, of letting the dreams take over, because dreams had already begun. Not just for Cyborg and his luminous fields, or Beast Boy and his moon-chasing adventures, but for all of them. Dreams of quiet places, of flying above clouds with no destination. Dreams of kitchens where the fridge is always full and the floor is always clean. Dreams of books that never end, and stories that only get better as the pages turn. Dreams of laughter, echoing down halls they've walked for years, some they've forgotten, and others yet to be discovered. The tower held it all, not just their gear, or their rooms, or their tech, but their stories. Every whispered promise, every late-night confession, every silent thank you never spoken out loud. Tonight, all of it slept. And in that stillness, the tower became not a fortress, not a command center, not a base, but something softer. A cradle, a dream space, a lighthouse of sleep, glowing gently in the night, not to guide anyone in, but to guard those who were already safe inside. And as the night grew deeper and the air grew cooler, the final sound echoing through its quiet walls was not a footstep or a voice or a beep. It was a sigh. One soft, slow sigh, shared by a family of 5, each in their own room, each at peace. And then nothing. Just night. The kind of night that doesn't ask questions or demand plans. The kind of night that simply is. And in that being, in that hush, the Titans slept. Together. Apart. Safe. And absolutely still. The hours stretched out like silk soft, flowing without edges. Time inside Titan's tower had slowed to a crawl, not from any force or magic, but from something far more subtle. Peace. True peace. The kind that sinks into your skin and bones. The kind that requires no explanation, no defense. It simply exists. The glow of the moon reached across the island, casting silver halos along the floor tiles and hugging the edges of furniture as if tucking them in. The stars blinked above like watchful guardians, their steady shimmer like silent nods of approval. It was as if the universe itself had agreed to pause just for a moment to let these young protectors rest. Within the tower, nothing stirred. The once vibrant halls were quiet now, not empty, but calm, like the final note of a lullaby that still echoes in the air long after the music has ended. Doors remained closed, but never locked. The warmth that wrapped around each room came not just from blankets and pillows, but from a deeper knowing, the unspoken truth that behind every door, someone was dreaming safely. And those dreams, They wove through the tower like drifting clouds. They weren't loud or cinematic. There were no explosions, no battles, only peace. Beast Boy's dreams took him to the forest, not just any forest, but one where the trees whispered his name like an old friend, where every animal curled up beside him in quiet harmony. His breath matched theirs. His heartbeat slowed to the rhythm of a world that didn't expect him to be funny or brave, just present. Cyborg floated through starlight, not space, not a void, but a glowing realm of neon threads and softly blinking lights, where music wasn't played but lived. In this dream, his body was light and sound. No wires, no repairs. Just joy. Just freedom. Starfire's dream stretched wide, a lavender sky above a crystal sea. The stars there were not distant, but close like friends she could reach out and touch. And among them were the people she loved, laughing in a place where the ground hummed with gentle energy and every flower bloomed brighter when someone smiled. Raven drifted through a dream with no edges. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty but whole. Her cloak trailed behind her, floating like smoke through a garden of glowing stones and endless sky. The only thing that moved faster than the wind was her own breath, finally slow, finally unburdened. And Robin. Robin dreamed of nothing heroic. No training. No pressure. He stood in the tower's living room, just as it was, bathed in sunlight. No alarms, no shadows. His friends sat beside him, playing a board game they never finished, eating snacks that would never run out, in a time that never ticked forward. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everything was already right. These dreams did not demand anything of them. They did not challenge them or test them. They simply held them. Let them rest. Let them remember what it felt like to just be. To be young. To be safe. To be home. And that home, that ever-standing, silent tower, remained the quietest character of all. Its lights dimmed, not out of weariness, but respect. The soft hum of the security system blended into the rhythm of the waves outside. Even the wind tapping at the windows felt gentle, like a soft knock from nature saying, "Sleep well." Inside the control room, screens flickered with faint status updates. Nothing urgent. No alerts. Just quiet reassurance. All systems stable. All zones secure. And perhaps, most importantly, all hearts at ease. Somewhere, a loose poster on the wall fluttered lightly from the breath of the vent. A sock, forgotten on the couch, rested like a fallen flag of a day well lived. And tucked near a pillow fort made from couch cushions and blankets, a half-finished comic book lay open. The last page read mid-giggle before slumber took over. Every inch of the tower held memory. Not just the big ones, the victories and the battles, but the small ones. Laughter echoing in the kitchen after a failed attempt at pancakes. The way someone always turned the thermostat up a notch after midnight. The quiet footfalls of Raven, walking to the rooftop when the sky was too beautiful to ignore. The sound of Cyborg humming while he tightened bolts that no one else noticed were loose. The way Beast Boy always left crumbs, no matter how carefully he ate. The whisper of Starfire's floating feet just before she entered a room, her presence like a glow rather than a sound. The sigh Robin released when everyone was home, his silent ritual, the one signal that the day was done and the team was safe. And now, that same sigh filled the tower again. Not from one mouth, but from all, one collective breath, soft and shared. As if even in sleep, the Titans were in sync, connected not by wires or commands, but by care. The kind of care that's earned, the kind that lasts. Outside, the sea remained steady. The tides, ancient and eternal, knew better than to rush the moment. They moved gently, curling around the island like protective arms. Even the clouds above parted slowly, revealing more stars like a curtain opening, not for applause, but for silence. The world didn't need them tonight. And that was okay. Because tonight, what the world gave them in return was rest. The deepest kind. The kind that sinks below the bones and touches the spirit. The kind that says, you did enough. You are enough. Sleep now. And so, in that sanctuary above the sea, behind titanium walls and glassy windows, the teen titans slept. Not just as heroes. Not just as teammates. But as family. Still, warm. Together. And as the final hour of night approached, and even the stars began to blink more slowly, the tower whispered its own good night, not in words, but in presence. It was there. It would always be there, watching over them, waiting for morning. But for now, just this, just night, just dreams, just love. And so, as the last breath of night holds steady above the island, Titan's tower remains still and glowing, like a candle in the dark. Not all homes need to be quiet to feel safe. But this one this night was built for stillness. A stillness that came not from silence, but from presence. Because rest, true rest, isn't just about sleep. It's about feeling that nothing more is needed from you. That for just a little while the world is okay without you standing guard. Tonight, every hallway, every room, every breath within these walls has spoken one truth louder than any battle cry. You are safe now. No alarms, no responsibilities, no shadows lurking just beyond the walls. Only peace, only sleep. And in this sleep, dreams are not a retreat, but a return to the self, to joy, to wonder, to moments so small and gentle they are often missed in the rush of daylight. But not tonight. Tonight even time respects the hush. The stars remain steady. The sky, still deep and blue, holds its breath. And within the quiet heart of the tower, 5 young souls rest without fear. Their battles paused. Their burdens set down. Their spirits wrapped in the simplest, oldest kind of magic known to any world, the kind that comes when you know you're not alone. As the moon leans westward and dawn inches slowly across the horizon, the first golden threads of morning light begin their careful approach. But not yet. Not now. Let this last moment stretch. Let it breathe. Because in this exact breath of time, this precious stillness between night and morning, the Titans are dreaming, and everything is exactly as it should be. Good night, Titan's Tower. And to those listening, wherever you are, sleep well.